Welcome, everyone. It's wonderful to have everyone here this morning. Wonderful to have a lot of alumni with us for our distinguished panel. And I want to jump right into the topic at hand. There are many ways of thinking about issues of conversion in the state of Israel. But the way I want to at least open is to frame it a bit in terms of the themes that we've been discussing over the course of the year. We've been focusing a lot about the Jewish political condition, and particularly thinking about issues of nationalism and religion in the public sphere. And I think that if we can jump right into it, we all know, as we discussed in the last session as well, Israel has a law of return. The law of return has a certain nationalist understanding and definition to it, which allows anyone who has a Jewish grandparent to be able to claim more or less automatic citizenship. This is defined by Nuremberg laws. Nuremberg discriminated against Jews based on grandparent. And so the law that was established for immigration, which is a crucial part of every state, basically adopted the same standard. As you know, this does not follow the classic Orthodox halachic standard of Jewish identity. Already in the 50s, this became an issue. Coalitions fell over the topic, known at that time as sort of the who is a Jew controversy. But in truth, it turned into also not only who is a Jew, but also who is a convert. I'll explain what I mean. At the time, the numbers were relatively small of the people that were more or less affiliated, associated, sociologically integrated into Israeli society, but weren't halachically, even by their own definitions, but certainly by the rabbinics' definitions, Jewish. The numbers today are much larger. And it's hard to know exactly what the numbers are, but people approximate that we're talking about 450,000 Israelis. One sociologist has called non-Jewish Jews, basically people that are fully integrated or largely integrated into Israeli society, education, army, work, and whatnot, but are not halachically Jewish. We're talking therefore about 6 to 7% of the Jewish Israeli population. And the question is, where are these people coming from? So Israelis travel across the world, they meet people, they make families, they come back to Israel. That's part of it. Fertility treatments have raised a big issue this week in the news, have also raised a lot of issues when it comes to the identity of babies that are born through IVF or surrogacy and other treatments. But the largest issue comes from immigration, sometimes from places like Ethiopia, where there's some questions still, other places around the world, and of course, particularly from the former Soviet Union, which raises all sorts of questions about, well, what are you going to do now? We have this situation of 6 to 7% of the Jewish population is not halachically Jewish. Do you have then a problem of intermarriage? Do you see that as a problem? Okay. Or do you not see that as a problem and say, no, just people won't intermarry? And then what is that? How does that impact the social fabric of Israeli society? And even more importantly, perhaps, how does this impact the Jewish identity and how people understand what it means to be Jewish? Many of the people coming believe themselves, understand themselves, at least identify themselves to be Jewish. And so one way to solve the problem, of course, is to try to prove people's Jewishness. There are programs like Tzohar, the Shorashim program, and others that try to help people find and prove their Jewish roots. That's certainly one way to do it. There's a more controversial proposal recently to use mitochondrial DNA to try to solve this problem, to prove people's Jewish ancestry on their mother's side. But that program has sort of, as you saw in your readings, been shelved, at least for now. And then the question becomes, well, then, if they can't prove someone's Jewish, then what do you do with it? Do you just live with the problem? Or do you say maybe the way to solve this issue, or at least reduce some of the tension, is through conversion? Now, Ben Gurion himself knew of this problem already in the 50s, and he had a very easy solution. He said basically nationalism, the nationalist identity will define what it means to be Jewish. Quoting Ruth, right? He said, Amech Ami, a person comes and says, right, your nation is my nation. This is all it means. I looked in the Bible. I don't see anything here about Kabbalah mitzvot. I don't see anything about a mikvah. I don't see anything about milah. Amech Ami is sufficient. And the rabbis across the board, right, have not found that definition compelling, particularly because the pasuk also says, not only Amech Ami, but Elokayach Elokai, right? Your God is my God. There's a religious component that cannot be ignored to Jewish identity. And then the challenge becomes, well, how does this impact this nationalist and religious identity when it comes to thinking about questions of conversions, right? There's a recent book that came out, I think it's very good, called When the State Winks, about Israel's state conversion authority, which basically claims that most of the people being converted through the rabbinate today are having what's known as what she calls wink-wink conversions. Converts are fake being observant, the rabbis look the other way, and we get about 2,000 converts a year from that process. Is this a healthy situation? Is this accurate? Right? And I want to end with the thinking about it, the other solutions. Can you convert people in the army? Can you convert people maybe when they're minors? You saw in your reading some of the solutions. But ultimately, what's at stake here is really what it means to be a convert and what it means to have a Jewish identity in the Jewish population of the state of Israel. And so to help us think about these questions and dilemmas, we've invited two leading religious Zionist rabbis in Israel, two people I know both well and admire and very appreciative that they're here. Rav Mosheh Lichtenstein, who's Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivat Etzion, and Rav David Stav, who's the chief rabbi of Sholem and the head of the Tzohar Rabbinical organization. But for our purposes, maybe most significantly, one of the founding figures in an independent conversion authority, a conversion organization called Giur Kalacha. And to try to help us figure out and understand what's at stake and what positions could be taken here. The format that we've decided upon is Rav Moshe is going to begin for about 15 minutes. Rav Stav will speak there for 15 minutes. Each of them will have about 10 minutes to add further thoughts. I'm going to ask one question to both, and then we'll open up the questions to the audience. So welcome to Rav Moshe. Thank you so much for joining us today.
There's no doubt that this is an important and crucial discussion for contemporary Judaism and certainly contemporary life in Israel. And as Rabbi Brody mentioned, it really brings, it's a confluence of a variety of major factors. And before I begin, I'd like to say 2 words about the halachic process in general. Halacha is the attempt to apply a system of ideas to a concrete situation. We have ideas, capital I, in the Platonic sense, which exist as in theory. Now, we try to apply them, down here, down on earth. Sometimes there's no good friction. You organize your life properly, so you know that Shabbos begins today at 4:30, if you're not invited to a panel, which ends very late. So you organize yourself, took you a while to say that. You organize yourself properly, so you have a plata, you have candles. In other words, if a person is properly organized, he shouldn't have a problem in Chot Shabbat, because he's arranged his life, he's been able to arrange his life. No, there's minimal friction. Or if halach is important to us, we organize our lives in such a way that we are able to have our halachic needs integrated into our normal lives, and there's no good problem. At times, it's impossible. Lo aleinu, you have a relative in the hospital, you have to spend the Shabbos in the hospital, you're a doctor in the hospital, you're a patient in the hospital. Circumstances are often beyond your control. You're in the army and there are various, you have various objectives and missions you have to do. You also lose control of the circumstances, and so on and so forth. And now, what does halakha attempt to do? It attempts to determine how to apply these ideas in a concrete situation. So now, and you always have to balance the 2 factors. I won't give a long lecture now about this, but halakha, just say the bottom line, halakha recognizes human need as a halachic factor. Now, halakha takes into account the needs of human society, of illness, of pain, of economic pain, etc., as a halachic factor. So therefore, you now have to attempt to balance the severity of the idea. Is it something, is a severe isur? Is it isur d'oraita? Is it an isur karet? Is it a trivial isur? Is it a problem of drinking water which was under the bed? Or is it a problem of chametz on Pesach? And you also have to ask how great the need is. I'll give a quick example to get the point across, and then we'll go into Gerutim. Michirat chametz. Michirat chametz is a loophole, and a very undesirable one at that. The Torah says, burn the chametz. The Torah has a clear objective. It says, rid yourself of chametz. Tashbitu, either burn it or get rid of your chametz. Now, you come, and you sell it to a guy, and you take it back a week later. It's what's called halakha harama. You're basically tricking the system. Is this legitimate? It works technically, but is it legitimate religiously? So it depends. If you're a first-year American in a one-year program, I will not say gap year, but I will say a first-year program of learning, and you and you come to me on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, I have $30 worth of cookies that my mother brought Mesiras Nefesh in January. Do you have to burn them? I will tell you unhesitatingly, yes. Torah said burn chametz. On the other hand, if you own a spaghetti factory or you own the makolet, and you come and say, do I have to burn all of my pasta? I'll say no. I don't think the Torah wants us once a year to destroy, to come to economic ruin. So halacha devises ways. Sometimes there are loopholes which work within the system. Sometimes you do it by choosing a more lenient opinion over more severe. In other words, halacha has a spectrum of opinions, what we call shatad, and there's a spectrum of situations. We call shatadchak and the like. Now, the greater, the more severe the idea, the lesser the need. So we take the stringent application. The greater the need, the lesser the idea, meaning that I have great need, and the Isur is not a really problematic Isur. So the scales tip in favor of providing a lenient opinion and allowing someone to do things which otherwise may not be permissible. What's the problem with this issue at hand? The problem is we have a huge need, and the idea is crucial to our Jewish identity. We're not talking here about some other, private halacha, some particular detail. We're talking about the essence of the system, the master code of Judaism, really. Or to put it differently, the question is not only mihu Yehudi. In order to determine mihu Yehudi, what's the conversion process, you have to ask mahu Yahadut. What is Judaism? Because in order to enter into the Jewish people, you have to know what Judaism, what defines Jewish people as Jews, or in other words, what is Judaism? So any attempt to cut corners, or to take, or to take a shortcut, will not just be a problem. Well, maybe I violated a severe isur. It's I am recasting and redefining the master code of Judaism. On the other hand, we have a huge need. There's a huge need. We have hundreds of thousands of people who came here, many of them sincerely and honestly believing they're Jewish, with a Jewish identity, and they identify as Jews. Some of them suffered as Jews. And as Rabbi Brody mentioned before, it's also a ticking time bomb in terms of assimilation and intermarriage. It also impacts upon the identity of the state. In other words, that Israel's identity, in which religion and state are somewhat intertwined, and there's no real separation of synagogue and state, is threatened by this model as well. If you don't integrate these people as Jews, they will live as non-Jews. And the more they live as non-Jews, and they need civil rights, and they need and you have to provide them with basic human needs, the synthesis of religion and state will obviously come apart to a greater or lesser degree. That's why the issue is so crucial. And that's why it hasn't been solved. If this was an easy problem, it would have been solved years ago. When I was 18 years old, I went to my father to visit his Rabbi, in English literature, his professor. He was a wonderful guy, a religious humanist, impressive religious humanist. But he knew nothing about Israel and Palestinians, and we came and he began to ask to describe what's going on in Israel, and my father outlined to him some of the problems in 1979, which existed. This is after Camp David. And after listening for a few minutes, so he sits back in his chair and says, "That's really complicated." So my father said, "Of course it's complicated. If it wasn't complicated, it would have been solved years ago." And the same as mihu Yehudi is with us since the 1950s, because it's really complicated. If it wasn't complicated, we would have solved it years ago. And that's why this problem, 2 generations, which included many prominent poskim and really Gedolei Olam, haven't been able to solve the problem, because it really is a huge problem. And it takes a different form in each generation. Rabbi Brody really outlined the problem as since the 1990s has really taken on a new form. Okay, all this introduction, if you want, how halacha works and why the problem is such a sticky problem. Nothing's halacha. Okay, now, let's talk about the issue itself. I'll try to give a very basic overview, and if I have time, I'll talk about the application. If not, in the next round. As was mentioned here before, the paradigm of Gerus is root. Amech ami, Elokai Elokai. Now, the two components mentioned. One is a national identity, Amech ami. The other is religious identity, Elokai Elokai. So a proper gerus has three elements. It has proper gerus has two concepts. Amecha mi Elokai Elokai. It has three elements: mila, tvila, and kabbalas mitzvahs. And now, without getting into a long halachic discussion, some of them are designed to provide you with national identity. Others are designed to provide you with your religious identity. That's kabbalas mitzvahs. And the question that's plagued us throughout, can they be separated? Can you take them and separate the two? It's a common halachic paradigm. There are many, many issues in halacha, or contemporary halacha, which basically sit upon this problem. Things which were twinned once upon a time have been unraveled. For instance, fertility. Once upon a time, you couldn't separate the ovum from the womb. Now you can. So what happens? A brain death and cardiac death. Once upon a time, they were inseparable. Now they're separable. So here, once upon a time, we never separated religious identity from national identity. And now we do. You have many people who identify as Jews historically, nationally. They see Jewish history as being their history. They identify with Jewish destiny, whatever we'll call it, but they don't identify with Torah. Or to phrase in the Rosh terms, we have Brit Avot and Brit Sinai. Brit Avot is your historical destiny. Brit Sinai is your religious commitment. Now, of course, the pasuk by Brit Avot talks about Liyot L'cha Le'Elokim U'Lezaracha Acharecha. It doesn't talk only about Zaracha Acharecha. It doesn't only talk about your progeny. It talks also about that I will be the God of your progeny. Liyot L'cha Le'Elokim, which is why it's not clear at all that you can separate the two. I believe personally there are halachic models which actually do separate. Some of which we can talk about conversion, which has a religious identity without a national identity. Some is the reverse. You have a national identity without a religious identity. But lacking time to give you a halachic overview, I'll stick to this final point. Essentially, ever since basically secular Jews have become a prominent part of Israel, there have been two approaches, to the best of my understanding, in poskim. One approach denies the ability to separate them. Judaism is a religion. And there's no such thing as Judaism without the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So you cannot have Kabbalah mitzvah, you can't have Gerus without Kabbalah mitzvahs. The second approach, which believes that Judaism has two legs, so to speak, at least two legs, and therefore it's one or the other suffices in order to make you a convert. Let me emphasize, if you've converted through Amecha Mi, you're obligated to observe mitzvot. In other words, you don't get a discount because you chose the national track. You are then obligated mitzvot, and vice versa. If you decide only to make a religious conversion, Jewish destiny is thrust upon you, like it or not. But how do you acquire your Jewish status? There are two schools of thought. One of them denies the ability to separate. And that seems to be the place that we're in the Shulchan Aruch. Then again, the Shulchan Aruch was unaware of this dilemma, so he just states, Gerut has got mitzvot. But there's no, at least the Shulchan Aruch, best of my memory and recollection, doesn't talk about the option of choosing one over the other. And there's another school of thought which basically accepts the fact that you can divide them and such conversion is binding. I want to re-emphasize, this is not just a question of conversion, it's a question of how you define Judaism. It really goes to the master code. Now, the Rambam, there's a lot of controversy about his position. The Rambam is clear in his opening statement. When a person wants to come under Kanfei Shekhinah, so the Rambam defines conversion as coming under God's wing. That is the basic definition. After he goes to all the details, and you can argue about what he's saying in the details. But it's very difficult to imagine the Rambam would recognize Gerus, Lakavos Mitzvos, because Judaism, or conversion, its definition is basically coming closer to the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And of course, this fits into his whole philosophy as articulated throughout Mishnah Torah and the Amor Nevuchim. Now, let me add two points in this regard. I believe it's crucial that we look at reality sincerely. In other words, in the past 10 years or so, you can hear many voices that say, we do get, it's even those who are currently converting Russian, particularly Russians, but all kinds of people really who lack commitment, but nevertheless they claim in the ceremony they do kavat mitzvot. Now, some of them just claim, if you get him to stand in the court and just say the words, "Ani mekabel mitzvot," even though you know that he's insincere, it doesn't matter. I've heard of Dichovsky, who's one of the most prominent dayanim of our generation. He claims that what a person thinks is irrelevant. In court, only matters what you state. What you think, what you're thinking is irrelevant, and therefore all that matters is what you're stating, and therefore he's fine, even though everyone knows that a minute later they think differently. But I think that position is incomprehensible. The idea that verbalizing a position matters and thinking it doesn't matter is true in transactions. It's a transaction between two people, so then what you think is irrelevant. What you say is what matters. But it's between you and God. In tefillah, you can't say, okay, as long as I'm saying this thing. Tefillah, what matters is what you feel, the subjective experience. Therefore, I think that such a position is, I can't accept it. Others will tell you that, well, at that moment, they undergo some religious transformation. It's a very romantic idea. I know, 10 minutes before he's not religious, 2 days later he's not religious, but a ruach tahara, hera left marom, and at the moment he's swept off his feet by the romance of the situation. I've heard such claims. And you have to be honest. If we're going to be Megayah, people like us mitzvahs, we have to say there's a machlokas, and we rely upon the lenient position. And not to fool ourselves that we are relying upon, that we are somehow being able to observe both opinions. Okay, just 20 seconds, and then I'll talk in the second half. I'd like to make one final point about this. If you read Rav Israeli's Tshuvot and Gerut, and if you talk to some people who are involved from the Merkaz Harav community, their whole perspective is different. They believe that Judaism really is a community. It's a people. And Kabbat mitzvot is only beyond, God did not obligate the individual with mitzvot. God obligated the community. And Gerut is really like basically filing a request to join the community. It's like you go to a country club and you ask to join and then they view your application. And essentially, Am Yisrael chooses its members. Like you choose your friends. So you choose your members. Now, why does this matter? Because then, Kabbat Mitzvot is not crucial, but more than that. Now, so why, nevertheless? Because we say, why should we want to accept people who are not Makabel Mitzvot? So, the truth is we don't. So that's why they agree that Halacha requires Kabbat Mitzvot. But if someone fooled me, since I accepted him, I can't withdraw his acceptance. Once I send out the acceptance letter and he's in the community, you can't withdraw it. The whole approach that Judaism is a community and a nationality and not a religion, I personally strongly disagree with. And therefore, I think that all of them, in other words, the whole position based upon that, I totally reject. In other words, you have to be honest and say, we want to guide the individual. Conversion is the individual. Either we are willing to accept the definition of Judaism, which is accepting of an individual without mitzvot, or we're not. But we got to say that this is the poskim. What I think about the person, I'll hold off for the next session.
Shalom. Good morning to everyone. I would like to continue from the point that Reb Moshe has stopped. And I would like to begin from the point he started, because I think what we share in common, although I guess we'll express a few disagreements in the very soon future, but what we share in common that we want the converts to understand that we are talking about a sincere process of getting into, of converting and becoming Jewish. We want the rabbis to refer to the halachic issues and to the halachic challenges that we have to confront with as serious issues, and not to solve them in ways that cause people to disgrace the halacha and to disgrace Jewish law. I would like to share with you the experience, I think, that many of the converts, I don't want to say all of them, because I don't want to say Lashon Hara on all of them, but I fully agree with Ramosha that when most of the converts come and say, we are accepting upon ourselves Torah or mitzvot, they don't mean it. And they intend to drive their car Shabbos afterwards, or to turn on the lights, or to open the television, or to do whatever a secular guy is doing in the state of Israel and elsewhere in the world. And the fact that the vast majority of the converts under the chief rabbinate, I dare to say not only under the chief rabbinate, but under other private organizations or rabbinic courts that carry out conversions, most of the converts actually lie when they stand in front of the rabbinic judges. That's a shame for the halacha, and that's a shame. It's really a chilul Hashem, because actually the lesson that we teach the converts is not, as Hillel was telling to the convert, ואהבת לרעך כמוך, זה כלל גדול בתורה. את השנוא עליך, אל תעשה לחברך. But what we teach them actually, that the most important lesson to enter Judaism is to learn how to lie to the rabbis and to tell them that you are sincere and that you intend to observe mitzvot, and there is no doubt that you don't have any intention to do that. Now, that's the reality today, that I completely agree with Rav Moshe that said this is something that we cannot accept. And actually, I could understand why a lot of rabbis criticized this process and said that's not conversion. On the other hand, nobody has dared to say, I am adopting the perception of maybe the Ritva and maybe others, or maybe Rav Uziel from the last generation, that said maybe we can be more lenient in the process of accepting mitzvot because of different reasons. I'm not going into the halachic issue. Nobody is ready to say loudly, we are adopting that view. And officially, we all adopt the second perception that believes that Kabbalat all mitzvot, accepting mitzvot, is an integral part and a crucial part for conversion. And if that's the case, that most of the converts have no interest really to accept upon themselves mitzvot, so we should not do that. If I would find a judge that the people that come and are dealing with him most of the times are cheating him and fool him, I would fire this dayan. I mean, how could be a dayan somebody that every second case fools him and actually achieves what he wants, and against actually the halacha and against the will of the judge. Okay, so that's what we share in common. Now, the question is, how do we deal with this problem? Now, I would touch one of the issues that Rav Moshe has mentioned about the definition of Judaism, but I will come into it in a moment, because I would like to share with you the problem that we have to deal with, and what's the challenge, and can we find solutions that will be halachically. And again, I fully agree with all the introduction that Rav Moshe was saying, was telling in the beginning. Can we find easily solutions that halachically will be acceptable and will not require from the converts to lie, to fool the system, and we'll be able to say to ourselves, we solved the problem, there is a huge need that has to be solved, and we found the way how to solve it. And what I would like to share with you is one of the solutions that I believe that could solve the problem, and we in Giyur Kalacha, we try to implement this solution. We offered this to the chief rabbinate many times in the past. Some of the rabbinic judges were very, very supportive. Some were afraid to continue with this solution because of different reasons. But I believe that if somebody cares about and has a responsibility for Klal Yisrael, he could, not easily, but he could adopt this solution for the future of the Jewish unity in the state of Israel. But before I continue, I would like to explain why the problem is so crucial for us. Today we are talking about a group that has more than 100,000 people between the ages of 0 and 18. We're talking about 5,000 minors that are born every year and are not halachically Jewish. If I will add to that what was published this week, that the Chief Rabbinate intends to convert every year another 8,000 babies because they had, ביצית, אני לא יודע איך להגיד. Egg donation, because they received egg donation from non-Jewish women, which according to certain rabbis requires conversion. This will add to the 5,000 and other 7,000 or 8,000 kids that have to go through a process of conversion, when we all know that these people have no intention to be observant in the meaning that we understand what observance and Kabbalat ol mitzvot means. This means that if we will not solve this problem, and these tens of thousands of kids that are around us and go to the Jewish schools and go to the universities and and we go together with them to the army, our kids will meet with them, will date with them. Our kids, when I say ours, I don't mean only the secular people. I'm talking about the Dati Leumi people. All of our kids meet these people in the army, meet these people in universities, they fall in love with them, and they want to get married, and all of a sudden they will discover that they are not Jewish. Now, you could tell me, and I will understand that, it happens in every American Jewish community. I mean, we all know the numbers that the Pew reports tell us about the assimilation and the intermarriage in America. And then I wanted to tell you two differences, or to share with you two differences. Difference number one, that every modern Orthodox guy that grows up in our education in North America, from day zero, from day one, that he has a bit of mind, is educated to deal with these issues. He knows, I'm not saying that there is a guarantee or that there is insurance that could guarantee us from intermarriage, but we understand that from the very beginning of our education, we are aware of the fact that we are surrounded with a non-Jewish society, which is the vast majority of the people that we will meet in the universities and in the offices. And we know what are our guidelines and what are our borders, and each one of us knows how to deal with this. That's not the case in the state of Israel. In Israel, we are used to the fact that besides the Arabs, that because we are enemies on the national level, that's not the real danger of intermarriage. We know that everybody here is Jewish, so there is mentally and psychologically, nobody is prepared to deal with this issue. That's number one. But number two, which makes a big difference between the state in Israel and Jews in America, with all the respect to American Jewry, the fact that there will be a certain percentage that will not be Jewish in 10 years or in 20 years, it's a pity. I mean, we have to struggle, we have to fight against it, but this is not a risk for a national existence. Versus the state of Israel, that if we here, we will become in 10 or 20 or 30 years, two nations, just like the two kingdoms that were separated 2,500 years ago, the kingdom of Judea and the kingdom of the Israeli kingdom. This is a recipe for our destruction. This is an existential threat on our existence. If we become here two nations, one will be defined as a Jewish halachic, the Jewish people, the Judea, and one will be the Israeli, the ones that are not the halachic Jews. That's for us a risk. So these are two differences. So what is the solution that I would like to share with you? Because we believe that the problem is crucial for our existence as a nation here in the state of Israel. I will give just the title. The title is Minors' Conversions. There is a Gemara that speaks about the idea of converting kids while they are minors. This halacha is based on the fact that these kids have no mind, they have no brain, they cannot accept anything upon themselves because they are not mature enough to accept upon themselves mitzvot or to accept upon themselves anything else because they are not mature. We, the rabbis, the Beis Din, the rabbinic court, believes that it is a privilege for them to become Jewish. Why do we believe that it's a privilege for them to become Jewish? Could be because of various reasons. Number one, because as Jewish people, we believe that it's a privilege. There will be rabbis that will maintain that the privilege is only if you know that they will observe mitzvot. This could be one of the reasons why there are rabbis that are not happy with this solution, because they say, but afterwards he will not observe mitzvot, which in the second round, I guess I will have to respond to this argument. But basically it's based on the idea that there is an option, there is a possibility to convert people, to convert minors, without the very fundamental element of accepting mitzvot, because we believe that it's for them a zchut, it's a privilege for them to become Jewish. It's true, the Gemara doesn't differentiate, doesn't separate between a conversion that takes place in Babylon or takes place in the United States or in Israel. But if it's true, the Gemara is a very general Gemara. But if it's true in Bavel, it's Kal Vachomer, Ben Bno Shel Kal Vachomer, that it's true in the state of Israel. Because every kid, I mean, if you convert a boy in New York or in North Carolina, you could ask yourself, is it a really privilege for him to be Jewish that will grow up in North Carolina? And that's, I'm not sure about the answer. But if you're talking about somebody that lives here in Israel, no kid wants to be exceptional. No kid wants to be in a class that he knows that all the kids will celebrate bar mitzvah in one way or another, and he will be the only one, or him with another one that will not be able to celebrate this because they are not Jewish, etc., etc. The zchut, the privilege for them to become Jewish, is something besides the privilege to be Jewish. It's because it's good for them to be Jewish as a part of the community, without going into the ideas of community, of the Jewish community. It's for them a privilege to be a part of the class, to be a part of the Jewish Israeli community that they are raised in. One of the reasons that rabbis are afraid to deal with this solution, which obviously there are very few words to say against it, and one of the rabbis said, well, there is a problem, because this guy will grow up in a family that his mother is not Jewish, and once she will cook for him, it will be bishulei akum. You know, the mother, there's one of the prohibitions that Chazal were establishing in order to prevent options of intermarriage, in order to prevent the possibility, the potential connection between boys, Israeli boys or Israeli girls with non-Jewish people, is to prohibit bishulei akum. I guess that if I continue the idea that Rav Moshe was saying in the beginning, that we have to weigh the sincereness of the prohibition versus the need, these issues could be solved easily.
I thought I was invited to provide a different opinion, but we have to disappoint you. So far, at least, the distance is not too great, and you have to ask for your money back if you're expecting some kind of, I just like to point out, we have a huge obligation, as was mentioned before, to the contemporary generation. But because I defined it before as the master code of Judaism, I think we have no less an obligation to previous generations and future generations. In other words, I have a lot of sympathy for that. Let's adopt the position that we will follow the lenient poskim, and it was done throughout the 20th century in North America often. People were guys like Kabbalas mitzvos, and people who lived here in the 1970s, meaning myself and Rav Stav, I guess, remember one of Maccabi Tel Aviv's basketball stars. He was a ger, and he ended up in North Carolina jail, by the way. But he was a ger, and it was done all the time. But for various reasons, policy has changed. But I do think that we have to take into account the needs of, in other words, we are defining what Judaism means. And that, dafka because we're in Israel and because it's a national question, it gives you, actually, you have to pause and ask yourself, maybe helping 100,000 people, maybe solving problem intermarriages now. The price, though, is not simply, well, we took a position, that Rabbi Moiser is right and the Covenant Rav is wrong. Rather, we're taking a position, what is Judaism? So I think we have to ask ourselves carefully, what is, no, it's, I think it's, I proceed much more cautiously because it really is such a crucial issue. Number two, obviously, actually, one second. Number two, Rav Stav was 1,000% right. We have the problem of responsibility to people who might go out. In other words, you take a kid into the school, and then there's social interaction, they date, they marry. On the other hand, if you do a conversion, which according to many opinions is not valid, you have the reverse problem. Maybe, since the school accepted a kid, but I think the conversion is not valid, so the school treats him as a Jew. If we didn't convert him, the school would make it clear to us he's not Jewish. At the moment, though, the school considers him Jewish, and then, even though I don't trust such a conversion, my daughter will then go out. You have to balance. I'm willing to accept, and I will already save up stuff some time. I'm not saying which concern outweighs the other, but I'm just saying you have to posit both concerns, one against the other. Okay, now to move on to more practical application. There's no doubt that the issue of minors is the simplest and best way to solve the problem. Once more, it's not bum-free. Maybe it's not glatt, but broadly speaking, it is a pretty good solution. And it's a solution which I think we should be able to live with, given the factors which we mentioned here, which are serious factors. And personally, I have no doubt that the idea that we are basically giving him a privilege by making him a Jew is true, regardless of his level of observance. A Jew is always holier than a goy, and even a non-observant Jew is a zchut. And broadly speaking, I'm willing to accept the policy that let's go and convert minors en masse. However, let's recognize what that means. That means all the conversions in Tzahal have to stop. Tzahal is dealing with 20-year-olds. And the problems you described before are absolutely true. In other words, it really is, the vast majority are not sincere. It means you have to stop Megayer and all the other people are not willing to kabbalah mitzvos. The upshot of that is you have to institute in some form or another civil marriage and civil burial. Because you cannot have a person living in society, he can't marry, he can't be buried. So if we say we will not accept their gerus because they will not accept kabbalah mitzvot, we're going to have civil marriage. We have to institute civil marriage and cemeteries. Now, the cemeteries already exist more or less. It's a given. It's more or less a given. But you have to institute civil marriage. And will that be a price to pay in terms of the vision of religion and state? Yes. Is it inevitable? Maybe. But if we focus upon minors, so I think yes, we have to move aside and recognize that when you do not, when you abstain from a guy or people are not minors, so there are certain implications which follow. One other point which I think is crucial in this regard, Israeli society is undergoing deep changes which are not always discussed or mentioned. And one is, I think, more clear, and you find it in the press. The other is, I think it's clear, you find much less discussion in the press. One of them is the aversion to intermarriage, this kind of liberal vision that everything goes. A year ago or something like that, a radio host or TV host who was Christian married a Jew. And anyone opposing it in terms of assimilation, intermarriage was branded as belonging to the Middle Ages, being narrow-minded, no more figure than Rivlin, who is relatively warm Jew, etc., etc. He came out in their defense and to say nothing about those, who are much more liberal. In other words, Israeli society has begun to lose its aversion to intermarriage, and at the end of the day, the train may have left the station. There was many of these processes may be happening anyways, and I can say for sure, some of the people, not only are we not, and I agree with 1,000% with everything I've said in the beginning, I think some of the Gerim are not interested in that. And my wife works with people who told her, I don't want to go through a Shem Gerus. I know she also has her sincerity and her integrity. She said, I'm not willing to do that, and I'll marry whoever I'll marry, regardless of the conversion, because the process indeed is a charade, and therefore they also refuse that. And now, but there's I think there's a second change, which is, and this has many ramifications, this is only one of them. I think Israeli Arabs feel part of society, and society sees them more and more as part of them. In other words, essentially, their national identity and their religion are coming apart. Essentially, they're becoming Israeli Muslims. You see it in many, many areas. I'll just give you an example. The Arab soccer players on the Israeli national team, and they have no problem representing Israel because Israel is their country for purposes of sports and the Olympics. And even though they go to a mosque and not to a Beit Knesset, and it's true, and you see them, they become more and more integrated. Israeli Arabs, they get insulted when you suggest that we have a peace agreement and they will move into a Palestinian state. They don't only claim because once upon a time they didn't want it, even though they wouldn't say it, because quality of life there is worse. Now they say straight out, this is my country, why should I leave it? In other words, they view themselves like Italian Americans or Irish Americans. They view themselves as Arab Israelis, and therefore they're much more integrated into the workforce. Go to any hospital and see how integrated they are. I'm talking about doctors. Go into university and see researchers. No, their whole self-identity is being transformed, which has many positive aspects. But for this, it means Israeli society, to a large degree, is becoming a nationality and not a religious group on a certain level. I think this will impact, in other words, like it or not, we met this vision of state and religion being fused together is coming apart because of that as well. Okay, now, the question is who does the conversions? And this, I think, is where we diverge. The Rabbanut has its policies, and it has its shortcomings. A good deal of the problems, though, the Rabbanut is blamed, belong to Shulchan Aruch. In other words, I'm willing to accept, and if Stav can give you a much longer description, I'm willing to accept 20, 30% of the problems, the way the Rabbanut handles itself. But let's face it, 70, 80% of the problems, be it Gittin, be it Geirus, be it Shabbos, 70% they're not the Shulchan Aruch. And you can't solve the problem. The fact that a man can divorce not a woman, the Rav Rashi is not to blame for that. And since that can't be changed, so a good deal of the anger, it's the same way you often channel your anger at the doctor because you're upset about your illness. You can't yell at God. You can't yell at cancer because there's no one to. So you yell at the doctor, and you taking the doctor becomes a lightning rod for your frustration. Now, if the doctor really is not actually, he's not doing it properly, so of course it multiplies. And I think the Rabbanut often takes a good deal of the animosity, partially because they deserve it, but also because Shulchan Aruch, and they're being a lightning rod for the frustration with this whole mix, this whole peculiar mix of religion and state, the way it's proceeded here in Israel. Secondly, the question is, which functions should be privatized and which functions should not? Kashrus, at the end of the day, to a large degree, is an individual choice. I can decide to eat only badatz. I can decide to eat only mahadin rabbanut. I can decide to eat whatever. So it's an individual choice. You want to have a private kashrus organization? So fine, you're competing against the rabbanut, etc. The moment that you open up private geirus and you try to dictate policy, I have serious doubts about the wisdom of such a strategy, because, first of all, I think certain functions belong to the state. So I know it's true that the state is unofficially delegated to the Badatz and the Bnei Brak, but nevertheless, the Badatz and Bnei Brak can always punt. In other words, the Badatz and Bnei Brak, if they don't want to convert someone, the Rabbanut will do it or won't do it. But in other words, they're not essentially forcing the Rabbanut to change policy. And I do believe at the end of the day, it's important to have certain functions belong to the state and not to individuals. And we have people who are appointed to make those decisions. And Geirus is a classic example. It's a national issue. It's not a private issue. Secondly, there's always the problem that I realize that the Batei Din, the private Batei Din, are hoping basically to force Rabbanut's hand. I'm skeptical it's going to happen in the foreseeable future because of various political dynamics. People I've spoken to in the past 2-3 years have, I think really understand the system, and the same skepticism. So far, the skepticism has been justified. In other words, despite the hope that Rabbanut's hand would be forced, that we would, it hasn't happened. It's happened in Gittin sometimes, but it hasn't happened in Geirus. And therefore, don't mind the Rabbanut. Now, I know that they're sincere and they tell people that this is conditional and they try not to mislead people. But at the end of the day, it's one price to pay if it's going to work. That's the price of going private and posting Rabbanut. If at the end of the day you pull it off, it's one price. It's something else if you can't pull it off. In other words, you're paying all the prices, but you're not basically getting the benefit. As long as these people can't marry and are, so to speak, they're not recognized, it's, in a sense, you paid a steep price for a minor achievement.
Okay, so now we have a reason to get the money back because I think we have a few points of disagreement. First of all, I would like to say that traditionally, if we follow the idea to follow tradition, rabbis were always converting in their towns, in their communities. There was never in Jewish history such a thing. I'm talking, of course, not 2,000 years ago, but I'm talking about 100 years ago, that conversion required a national agreement. The Beis Din of Hillel was converting people that the Beis Din of Shammai would never be ready to accept. And there were always rabbis that converted here in Israel. There were local rabbis that converted in Kfar Saba, in Haifa, in the kibbutzim, different rabbis that part of them belonged to the chief rabbinate, a part of them did not belong. Nobody saw any problem in the fact that local rabbis that were Yerei Shamayim, that were scholars, were involved in conversion. So I think that the idea that there should be one gatekeeper above everybody, that he will draw the lines and he will decide what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, has never existed since the time that we have no more Sanhedrin. I guess that when these kind of issues would have come to the Sanhedrin would have decided. But since the Sanhedrin, there's never been a place where there was a community that took responsibility from rabbis to convert. Something very strange occurs recently in the state of Israel. I mean, suppose you go now to a rabbi that believes that the authority for conversion is the chief rabbinate. And you tell him, look, there were 3 rabbis, sincere rabbis, that converted this minor, or let's say even converted an adult, and he's a ger tzedek with all the conditions that Moshe has required. But the only problem is that it wasn't under the umbrella of the chief rabbinate. There were 3 rabbis in Efrat or 3 rabbis elsewhere that converted him. There are rabbis that will say, sticking to this perception, well, he's not Jewish because it wasn't under the chief rabbinate. Now, that's nonsense. That's Isur, a prohibition of Inui Ager. There is no place in Shulchan Aruch, no place in the Rambam that will demand that there will be one authority that will convert. If we continue the Rambam's way, even Shlosha Idiotot are authorized to carry out conversion, especially if we are talking about 3 scholars. There was never a demand of a central authority that will be needed in order to carry out conversions. Now, if there is a rationale behind this argument, is the need that if you want the state or the chief rabbinate to recognize this conversion, then it's better for the converts to do that. That's true, but then it has to be true from all sides. Ask any Haredi rabbi, will he be ready to marry a convert that was converted under the chief rabbinate? If you find one rabbi, even if you will pay him off a lot of money, he will not be ready to do that because for him it's marrying a goy. It's intermarriage. That's the way they refer to the chief rabbinate. So if there was one authority that everybody was accepting it, I could understand what Moshe is saying. But the situation today is anyway that nobody is recognizing the conversions of the chief rabbinate besides the chief rabbinate itself, and only in one arm. In the second arm, the chief rabbinate, I'm not sure that Moshe is aware of that, but the chief rabbinate has accepted the decision just a year ago, saying the following. There were complaints against a few local rabbinates that they didn't recognize the validity of conversions under the chief rabbinate. I'm not talking about the Haredi rabbi in Bnei Brak. I'm talking, for instance, the chief rabbi in Ashdod or the chief rabbi in Petach Tikvah was not ready to accept a conversion that was done in the Beis Din of the rabbinate in Petach Tikvah or elsewhere. So I said to the rabbis, well, it doesn't make sense. I mean, you converted them. How come you allow your rabbis not to register them, not to marry them? What do you expect these couples to do? And then before these couples apply to the Supreme Court and will get support from the Supreme Court, the Chief Rabbinate Council received a decision saying that even though people converted under the Chief Rabbinate, the local rabbi has the authority to question the validity of this conversion, which means that practically speaking, since we all know that as we have said already, most of these converts will not be observant, most of the rabbis will not be ready to register them because they don't see them as Jews, because they were converted in fake conversion as it's perceived by them, and maybe they are right. And now, so even the official conversion of the chief rabbinate is not recognized by the chief rabbinate itself. So you complain on these private rabbinic courts that carry out conversions, and you actually say, well, you want it to be recognized everywhere. No conversion is recognized everywhere. By the way, even the question of egg donation, you know that there are here today tens of thousands of people that according to Rav Eliashiv, they are not Jewish. According to Shlomo Zalman, they are Jewish because of this one poor egg donation, and that's a big debate now. Is the way of converting minors, I'm not saying glut 100% because there is no glut in besides flesh, and that the flesh also the fact that it's glut, but there is no glut. But is it a mainstream way that Moshe Feinstein, Rav Ovadia Yosef, and many others accepted and saw this as a solution? If we want to face a problem, I think that's the one way. Now a question of that's a tactical debate. Will we succeed to convince the rabbinate eventually or not? I agree that the goal should be that these converts, of course, we tell them ahead, nobody is fooled, nobody is misled, everybody knows in advance, and they have to sign a paper saying, we know that this conversion is not recognized by the chief rabbinate. But I want to be a bit less skeptical, and from my experience, we were all skeptical about the option of opening the zones of marriage in Israel, that a couple would be able to get married everywhere. The rabbinate was against it, and the Haredi parties were against it, and a few of the right-wing rabbis in the modern Orthodoxy were against it. Eventually, now, today, everybody says not only that we achieved that, it's perceived as something that was never in debate. You know, when we talk about kashrut, people come and say, why do Tzohar is involved in kashrut issues? And, well, your marriage project, that's amazing, that's in consensus. But since we grew up together, we all know how in the beginning of the marriage project, there were a lot of resistance in the chief rabbinate, and even in the right wing in our community, that were against it. Why do you encourage other rabbis to carry out conversions? It belongs to the rabbinate, etc., etc. And eventually we achieved it. I still remember one letter of your father, Rabbi Aaron Zecher Tzadik Levracha, that was supposed, and he was so upset about that, he was supposed to approve one of the Ramim that he asked to replace him in performing a wedding of one of the students in Etzion. And the chief rabbinate refused to allow him because he didn't have the right documents, and he wrote a very, very sharp letter to the chief rabbi at that time, I will not mention his name, saying, what are you doing here? I mean, we're talking about the biggest scholars in the religious Zionist world, and you are raising obstacles. You allow every shmendrik to perform a wedding, and here you're talking about the biggest scholars, and you raise obstacles in front of them. So we know that a part of the way to achieve things in Israel is to struggle, to stand for issues that we believe in. And I really believe that once we will have 5,000 miners, it will take us 5 years, 10 years. Once we'll have 5,000 miners, the chief rabbinate will have no other choice but to recognize the validity of conversions of miners. I would say even more than that. I don't want, Al tiftechu b'ntivim, we all know this, but you know, and we all know, the political system in Israel is not sustainable. And it's not far from being able to achieve these accomplishments, even in the very soon future. I don't want to scatter promises and to say next year it will be already recognized, but I think that this since the problem is sincere, I believe that the solution will be found, and I believe that the politicians will be aware of that problem, and we will find together the way to recognize these conversions and to recognize the local rabbis, to give them the authority to convert, and consequent to that will be a massive conversion for the miners.
Okay, I'm going to ask each of you to follow up on this for a moment. Rav Moshe, you spoke, I think, very clearly about the changes in Israeli society. Things have changed the way. You also spoke about some of the advantages and disadvantages of various theses, but it seems that, I'm not sure, tachlis, in practice, what would you propose to do, if anything, or would you want the chief rabbi to do, even though you're skeptical the chief rabbi will do anything, because you just said that society is changing. And so if halacha doesn't act, or halachic figures don't act, then maybe the solution will never come. So at some point, do you have to put down a solution? And if so, what would you do? And to Rav Stav, I'll say back to what Rav Moshe started with. I mean, I understand it's maybe a loophole, ger katan, or how you want to phrase it, but Rav Moshe raises a very serious question. If the kids, aren't going to be observant, and you're converting them, forgetting about whether people accept it or not, have you not redefined what Judaism is? By saying, I'm going to do this conversion without Kabbalat mitzvot to get around the problem, and I've solved it, but not addressed that issue. Maybe I'll start with Rav Stav, and then we'll go to Rav Moshe.
Something that Rav Moshe has mentioned, and I think is very important. I think that Rav Moshe touched a very, very interesting issue. The story with this reporter or actor that married a non-Jewish woman last year. Now, to see the secular responses is one thing. To see the Haredi and religious responses to this story is also, we can expect these responses. One of the very interesting responses was Yair Lapid. Yair Lapid, I don't have to tell you, one of the leaders of the Blue and White, is perceived as belongs to the center left, to us the left, is perceived as an anti-religious, but he speaks a lot against assimilation. And he speaks a lot against intermarriage. And he had to define for himself, how does he react to this story? On one hand, he didn't want to be perceived as a religious guy that speaks against intermarriage and goes into this couple's life. That, by the way, they were very popular actors. It's not only that, we're not talking about Reuven and Jamila. We're talking about the most popular actors in the TV. Lucy El Arish, and I don't remember, Tzachi Alevi, I think it was even a Levi, the boy. Now, so he said, he was asked about that, and he wrote a long post in the Facebook, and he said, look, from a national point of view, I believe that we have to fight against intermarriage. We have to fight against assimilation. I don't want to go into some individual's lives and to tell him what to do. Now, the fact that he expressed himself in this way taught me a lot. Number one, even in the mainstream of the secular world, the scale is not black and white. It's not either you are completely observant or you are completely secular. There's a long range, a long scale between them, and maybe most of the Israelis are there. And that's in response to your question as well. I really believe, I will start with something that I heard from Rav Amital. And he said, to grow up in Israel, unlike America, to grow up in Israel means that every Israeli knows what is Shabbat, knows what is Yom Kippur, even the words that he uses, Yom Rishon, Yom Sheni. It's not Sunday, it's not Monday, it's Yom Rishon B'Shabbat. He knows that the week is based on Shabbat. There is a beginning, the first day of Shabbat and the second day. The Jewish calendar is the calendar that conducts the Israeli life, even the Israeli, not only the religious life. Now, most of the Israelis, it must be said here, 73% of Israelis declared that they light Hanukkah candles. Now, this is not something that you can undermine, you can ignore. It's not true that the Israeli society does not want to be Jewish. It's true that they do not accept Brit Sinai, as Moshe was mentioning, in the way we as observant people are accepting it. But it doesn't mean that they don't want to be a part not only from Jewish history, not only from Jewish culture, even from Jewish religion. Not in a way that is coerced on them. Many of them, most of the Israeli women this afternoon, hoping that they will not be stuck in different panels, they will arrive and they will light Shabbos candles. Most of the Israelis will make Kiddush. Most of the Israelis will have Shabbos table. It will not look like our Shabbos table, I guess. Many of them will say Parashat Shavua, will say Dvar Torah. I could tell you, I've written a book on Parashat Shavua. Most of the customers, of the readers, are secular, and I get responses from them. So that's why I'm saying that when somebody, and that one of the ideas that Rabinovich was saying in the beginning of the process of converting minors, he said, look, to grow up in Israel, even in a secular school, it's not to grow up elsewhere behind the ocean where people have no clue about the Jewish culture. To grow in Israeli culture, I'm not saying that it guarantees that you'll be observant, but it guarantees that in most of the cases, you'll be more and more traditional, you'll be more and more connected. Hashem will be, Hashem, Elokai Elokai. It will be relatively easy to say Elokai Elokai to most of the people. It will be difficult to say that there will be makpid on Ilchot Borer. I agree. By the way, I know many religious people that I'm not sure that they are so makpid on Ilchot Borer. But maybe they will not go into the details. But the fact that they live here and the changes that Rav Moshe was mentioning, and I think he is 100% right on one hand, but on the other hand, we see a huge movement towards more of spiritualism, more of tradition. The official numbers, let's stick to the official numbers of the State of Israel. The Prime Minister's minister has published last year the official numbers of how the Israeli society is diverse. And for the first time in Israel's history, less than 50% declared themselves as secular, as Chiloni. 45% perceive themselves as Chiloni. 30% of the Israeli society sees itself as traditional. 25% define themselves as Dati and Haredi. Now, these are numbers that we cannot ignore. And if you go into the details of the Chiloni, who defines himself as Chiloni, you will see that many of them, the word Chiloni could be translated and interpreted in different ways that you could include them easily in the tradition.
I'll start from maybe from the end. At the end of the day, I think my disagreement with Stav is minor. Tarte mashma. Meaning, excuse me. At the end of the day, whether we do a private or public, and that's really it's relatively a trivial detail in the grand scheme of things. The grand scheme of things really is whether in Kabul Gerus Akavos Mitzvah or not. Now, I will point out there are a few differences. I think, obviously, for over the generations, every community did Gerus. There was a central authority. There was no state. Obviously, when you lived in Hungary in the 18th century, you lived in Morocco in the 19th century. Obviously, each communal rabbi did Gerus. And the point is, when you now have a state and a national organization, it's a game changer. Secondly, obviously, once upon a time, it's a bit complicated, but let's say at least the last 150 years, the laws of the state did not recognize Jewish conversions. So you don't need central authority. It's just within the halakhic system. Over here, Jewish conversions matter for secular law, for civil law, and therefore you do need a central authority. But what's more, I want to quibble on a minor point. I will also add, I believe and I hope, and if I'm mistaken, so it's really, it's really shocking. If three Rabbanim privately would megayer a katan who would then mekayim mitzvos, and you go to religious school and I can't believe that the Rabbanut would say he's a goy and then his kiddush are not a tofis, etc. Okay, if they say it's shocking, but I think what happens more often than not is that there are different positions of psak, and they reserve the prerogative to paskin according to one posek, not according to the other. Okay, now, but let's put this aside. I think the real issue here is, the basic issue facing us is, I want to convert non-minors into gerus l'kavos mitzvos. That's really the big, for instance, the army, which is a major player, to the best of my understanding, in the whole contemporary conversion, and we're not talking about minors over there. So if we have solutions for, and I agree 100% about all the egg donations and the surrogate mothers, that those can be, we can manage those, we can manage minors. The real issue is those who are adults. And if private b'tei din are not megayer them al-kavos mitzvos, so then the gap is very slim. If they are megayer them al-kavos mitzvos, I think I said before, there are two traditions, there are two positions in poskim. If push comes to shove and I had to decide, I think I would not megayer them. But I'm not. I said that ambivalently, and maybe that's why I'm Rosh Yeshiva, not a posek. But he'll jump on that in a minute, I'm sure. But I recognize that poskim often have needs that, maybe Josh, it's easy to say this. I think at the end of the day, though, when push comes to shove, because I said in the beginning, I think changing the master code is really, and that's what I also think you have to have. It's like this, poskim of stature and consensus for such major changes. I also like to point out, you asked me what the solution is. I'll be honest, not every problem has a solution. Sometimes we don't have solutions. I remember speaking once about trends going on in secular society, and I pointed out that religious people can often not impact upon secular society because the dynamics are occurring from within. From person cannot change the dynamics of secular society. So can the Yeshiva came and said, "Asmausim." So I said to him, not every problem has a solution. Sometimes it's a given, and you wait, down the road what happens, and. I think it's true of many issues. We recently had some days in the Yeshiva which discuss about tzedakah. Not every problem in tzedakah is solvable. Sometimes you can't solve the problem, and I think it's true now. It could very well be that the contemporary circumstances may not provide us with a great solution, and maybe we'll have to learn to live with a certain price. There will be a price either way, but you come and say to me, well, society's changing, what's your solution? Maybe I'll have a solution, maybe I won't. But the fact that society is changing per se does not by definition, it requires me to address the issue and to think about it deep, long and deep. It doesn't mean, though, that I will necessarily, after doing all this thought, will come up with a solution. Maybe my solution will be, what do we do about intermarriage and assimilation in Chutz La'aretz? It's tragic. I remember I was 17 years old, and the Rav said to me once, 100 years from now, who knows how many people remain Jewish, and I couldn't fathom the idea. But when you get older, you recognize sometimes problems don't always have solutions. And the final point, I agree wholeheartedly with everything Rav David said before about the connection of secular Israelis to Yiddishkeit and lighting candles, etc., etc. I also think that we have to do everything possible to encourage those trends. And I think Tzohar in general, and Rav Stav specifically, are doing great work in that regard. The more we can make Yiddishkeit palatable, accessible, and the like, I think it's one of the biggest missions of the generation. But it's what happens when they come and say to you, we don't want to light Hanukkah candles. We want to light Hanukkah candles on our own terms. we're like, it's more convenient to have Hanukkah candles a week later, and for whatever reason, or we have to do everything possible. And I think and Stav great work in that regard. Yiddishkeit, palate like, I thought the generation. It's what happens. We don't want to like exactly. I remember that I think 2-3 cycles ago, the Daf Yomi. So the person who organized the event at the time was, I think, Madison Square Garden, not before they outgrew. And so the guy who organized it said to Moshe Sher at the time, he said, why once every 7 years? Do every 3.5 years. You can fill the hall every 3 years. So go explain that you can't. Obviously, we should encourage Chilonim to have more Yiddishkeit. But the problem becomes acute when they want to. Do we have to change Yiddishkeit because of that? Will I change Hanukkah? Will I change Purim? I won't. So the question here is, am I changing Geirus or am I not? If I won't change Hanukkah, I still won't change Geirus. So therefore, the question goes back to what I began with. Are we changing it or are we following an opinion which is legitimate? And that goes back to the original question.
Rav Moshe began its introduction with outlining the way in which the application of a halachic ideal to the real world is sometimes fraught with friction, and the frictions that he stipulated were mostly negative problems like economy or pain or suffering. And I wonder if there are positive things which can be like positive problems which might also be important halachic considerations when applying halacha to the real world. And like in the application, in this conversation, I think the main problem was what happens when my child gets old enough and meets someone who's not Jewish, but very much Israeli Jewish. And that is a problem which we have to face as opposed to like some sort of positive thing. I think Rav Stav was talking about the way in which secular Israelis can be more Jewish, even if not like typical Orthodox, or is it zchut to be a Jewish person, and the way in which we can encourage that, and the way in which that might be a positive halachic ideal that will have an impact on the conversation of the application of halacha to conversion.
I think the answer is absolutely yes. There's certainly positive values. I'll give you one example, Kavod Abrios, or Kvod Yom Tov, or things like that. There's certainly positive values which we would also be willing to take a more lenient position in order to encourage them. Absolutely. More often than not, the negative examples are more prominent, but for sure. In other words, I would definitely, for instance, if you want, just take a very plain and simple example, you want to make an early Shabbos. It's machlok at the end of the day. Now, I would not maybe say personally I prefer to make a late Shabbos, but I make an early Shabbos if I thought that my 5-year-old would fall asleep, or my 85-year-old grandparent would also not make it to 8, 9 p.m. So, but that's I think the answer is absolutely yes. Regarding your second question, what was the second question? No, excuse me. The second question like this. It wasn't it was an assumption which I disagreed with. I don't think the main point was my daughter marrying someone. I think the main point, at least from my point of view, is how do we define Judaism? That's why I've been constantly harping here that Mil Yehudi is really Ma'u Yahadut. That's my point of view is the main point. With the children, it's a concern. It's a serious concern, but I think it's we can address that in many ways. But my main problem is simply how do you define what Judaism is all about, and whether you can take and then secondly also what who do you accept?
Just add one more kind of a value. Take for instance the fact, and I'm not saying that this is the one issue and the only one issue that we should take in consideration, but the fact that, for instance, these Russians that arrived to Israel, they arrived to the state of Israel. It's a part of the process of redemption, of kibbutz galuyot. It's something that I really take in consideration. I'm not sure that I will refer to the same story with the same percentage of intermarriage had it happened in the United States, for instance, or in France. The fact that they are coming because they suffered as Jews, because they want to go to the Jewish army, to the IDF, and they want to be a part of the Jewish nation / Israeli nation. And they are part of the process of our kids that are coming back from 4 edges of the world is a positive value that I weigh in the way I deal with this issue. It's not something that I ignore. It's a part of the process that I take in my mind when I'm looking for a solution. Because of that, there are others that don't see the entire process as in the same way, and they don't see any reason. I'll give you another factor that could be changed. We did not refer to this. Moshe is focused on the content of what is Judaism. But let me raise it just for 2 seconds. Another issue. Do we want to encourage people to convert? Usually, traditionally, the traditional position, and we all grew up on that we are not missionaries, we do not convince nobody to convert, etc., although it was a debate between rabbis, but basically that was the tradition of our psika, that we don't encourage people to convert. Is that the case today? Is the fact that we have here hundreds of thousands of people that are sons or daughters of half-family Jewish, which is the wrong side. Yes? They're coming from the father Jewish. The father was Jewish. Does this change the way we are approaching to them? Do we want to encourage them? Let's assume that they will become frum and they will be all gerei tzedek. Is it our interest to encourage them to convert, or do we see them as a regular goy that wants to convert? It's something that we have to take in consideration.